I want to thank you guys for showing up in the morning. I know there's a lot of activities going on today. There's hearings on the Hills, there's other events going on, and that we're competing for your time. And so I appreciate you guys deciding to join with us to partake in this important discussion we're going to have on bilateral relationships between the United States and Colombia. Please join us. Come in. And I just want to take a couple of minutes to give a brief background on this series before I introduce our panelists. I know that's who you're here to hear and not here to listen to me, despite any opinions to the contrary coming from myself. But NDN launched earlier this year a program that we call the Latin American Policy Initiative. We have with us also Maggie Barker, who I'd like to acknowledge. She's our Policy Director of the Globalization Initiative. Say hi, Maggie. The project that I'm working with is a collaboration with a lot of the work that Maggie has done prior to me joining NDN. And it's about discussing the future of a world in which, we can no longer consider an isolationist movement for the United States, and we have to begin to look at ways that America can maintain its leadership position globally while acknowledging and improving relationships with different countries across this planet that we live on. My specific focus focuses on Latin America. And in the past, many organizations and many elected officials and governing bodies have looked at Latin America as a whole. And it is important to look at hemispheric relations and when we can partner with them. But it's also important to look at the individual relationships the United States has with individual countries. I'm sure it's become quite evident in the past few months that our relationship with Venezuela is dramatically different than our relationship with Colombia, which is still different than our relationship with Brazil and even our relationship with Mexico. And so to assume that our relationship with Latin America is a uniform policy would be a flawed way to look at how the United States should engage and deal with this issue. So we've launched on a monthly series to give an open forum and an opportunity for people to come listen to ambassadors, to members of Congress, to insiders and stakeholders about what are the issues that are actually impacting our bilateral relationships between the United States and each one of these individual countries. Today with us we have Nelson Cunningham, who's on the advisory board of NDN, as well as the Honorable Ambassador Carolina Barco, the ambassador to Colombia. And so we're very delighted to have them here with us to have this discussion. Just so that I can give you guys a format, the way we do this is that we will have the panelists speak, and at the end of both remarks, then we open it up for Q&A. And the one thing that I would like you guys to keep in mind is that today we are here to talk about the relationship between the United States and Colombia and not other countries. And we will get to those individual countries in the future, just as we have in the past with Mexico and Ecuador. So we are not here to talk about any individual relationships or issues that may arise between the United States and or Colombia with other countries, but we are here specifically to talk about Colombia and the U.S. So as you're asking your questions or as you're posing your frame of thought, to keep that relevant to the issue we're having here today. Also, as I mentioned, for those who just came in, if you could please put your phone on vibrate or on silent, I would appreciate that so that we don't interrupt the panelists. And then the last thing I would tell you is that on here we have a folder just on some of the work that NDN has done in the past on Latin America. And if there's any information that you guys would like to have on our future events, please feel free to let me know. If you'd like to have my card or get put on our mailing list, we have a lot of our staff around here that can help you. So having said that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all load the presentation so that it's ready. And then I'm going to introduce So I'm going to leave this running so it's ready for the ambassador. But the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to acknowledge and welcome Nelson Cunningham again, who's with McLarty & Associates and who's been involved with Latin American issues previously in the Clinton administration and just in his own capacity now in his industry, who has extensive knowledge on Colombia and Latin America, who's been a great asset to NDN to help us understand these issues affecting the United States and Latin America, and who's been a great resource for us to have. And so please welcome to the stage, to the podium, Nelson Cunningham.
Well, thank you very much, Andres, and thank you for the opportunity to come before this terrific group and to talk about two entities about which I care a great deal and about which I have, with each of which I have a long history. The first is NDN. I've been on the advisory board at NDN for almost 10 years. It is one of the most interesting, progressive, thoughtful organizations in Washington at understanding where the next set of politics and policies will go. Simon Rosenberg, the head of NDN, is a leader on internet communications, on the net routes, saw the potential of that in politics long before anybody else did. He's also been a leader on the issue of Hispanic politics, understanding that for Democrats, the Hispanic vote, Hispanic issues were going to be key. Reaching out to that community, understanding that community, drawing that community in was going to be essential to a successful politics in the United States. And he has helped many people on the progressive side put together the tools for understanding how Hispanic issues can be woven in to politics overall. This program, focusing on Latin America, is a key part of that program, and I've been particularly proud to see how NDN has implemented this program, and the ambassadors, the meetings with Hill leaders who focus on Latin America, as a way to help us, frankly, integrate Latin American policy with Hispanic politics into a whole, which can help link us more closely together with our neighbors to the south. So I'm here both because I'm proud to be a member of NDN. I'm also here because I have a long personal history with Colombia, a country I love. When I was 5 weeks old, my parents moved to Cali, Colombia. I spent my early formative years living there. My brother was born in Cali. I am afraid I no longer speak the perfect Spanish that they tried to teach me back then, which Colombians have. But Colombia still has a place close to my heart. For those of us who have watched Colombia over the last 40 years, it's been remarkable to see the struggles which Colombia has faced, the challenges it has had to overcome because of the dual tyrannies of the guerrilla movements on the left, the narco-trafficking, the paramilitaries which rose up on the right. I was there at the birth of Plan Colombia in the Clinton years, was very proud of the relationship that we began to forge with Colombia at that time, just over 10 years ago, and have been very proud to see the steady progress that Colombia has made in dealing with narco-trafficking, in dealing with narcotics issues, and dealing with the guerrilla movement. On a more personal basis, more recently, my firm was deeply involved in the dramatic and historic rescue of the hostages 3 weeks ago. We played a very minor role. We worked with the families and helped them understand what was happening. We liaised with the governments. But the actions of the Colombian government there, the combination of intelligence, military action, operations, was absolutely stunning and superb. And I'm perfectly convinced it's going to make a fantastic movie someday. Playing a key role in that movie is going to be our guest tonight, our guest this morning, I should say. Ambassador Barco follows in a long line of distinguished polymaths. The Colombian government circles tend to turn out the most amazing combinations of intellectuals, politicians, thought leaders, and she comes straight out of that tradition. Her father, Virgilio Barco, was one of the great presidents of Colombia's modern history. She herself has spent years working in urban planning, as a scholar, as an advisor to the United Nations. She served as Colombia's foreign minister for 4 years, from 2002 until 2006, until President Uribe sent her up here to serve him as his ambassador here in Washington, in what is perhaps the key relationship for Colombia today as it attempts to forge its new role in the world with a more stable domestic situation. Ambassador Barco, you've only been in Washington 2 years next month, but it feels to those of us who've been following Colombia as though you've been here at least 10 years, and we'd like to have you be ambassador for life. Let me turn it over to you, Ambassador. Let us all give us a hand and welcome you back to the Barco.
Your Spanish is excellent.
Aquí, aquí para la próxima y esta, pues, si quieres regresar.
Perfecto. Creo que puedo hacer eso. I hope I can do it. I'm not the most technological. But I am very happy to be here this morning, and I appreciate that we moved it from noon to the morning because I couldn't do it at noon. Our Minister of Defense is coming, and I had to be ready to receive him, and so that's why I wanted to have a chance, and I'm glad we were able to accommodate. So thank you for coming up at this early moment. And in speaking about the relationship between Colombia and the United States, I think there are two words that we can that we can always use: a long friendship. In fact, the U.S. was the first country to recognize Colombia's independence. And ever since then, we have worked together on many, many issues in cooperation. For example, the Alliance for Progress. We had a very distinguished and far-seeing president at that moment called Alberto Lleras Camargo, who was very active in the Pan-American Union and also in the United Nations. And he saw the importance of the Alliance for Progress. So the first group of Peace Corps of 40 that left the U.S. went to Colombia. And I think all of these kind of situations show how Colombia and the United States have worked together for many years. And it's not a matter of our governments. It's a matter, it goes beyond this. It's our states, it's our countries, it's our peoples, it's our values. And I think that's at the base, and that's what we have to remember as we look at the way that we've been working ahead. And just most recently, as Nelson has said, you've been helping us in a very significant way with Plan Colombia. And I would say that the presentation we're going to see today shows how this is a very successful example of the U.S. helping a country to move ahead. In the year 2002, and for me it's painful to say it, but if I'm going to be intellectually honest, a lot of people were saying this is a country that is becoming a failed state. It's a country that's not able to control some of its areas. It's a country where the violence is taking over. It's a country where its economy, which has always been strong because we've been a very conservative country who's never defaulted. We've always paid back. We've never had hyperinflation. It was collapsing in '98. We had a recession, the first recession after the Depression. So it was a country that was facing extreme problems. And you will see today that we're a country full of optimism and we're making a change. And that has to do with strong leadership in Colombia, but it has to do with the support that we've been receiving from the U.S. through Plan Colombia. It's a support that started with President Clinton, that's gone through Congress through all these years, and you will see that it's made a difference. And I would say that's what's behind that wonderful, wonderful rescue that I think we all still light up when we think about it, to have been able to get out. But this is to all of us, because we were able to get out the 3 Americans. That was very important. Ingrid Betancourt, but also the 11 soldiers who had been there for 10 years. And they all came out, and their messages were fantastic. There was no anger. There was no bitterness. Let's think about the others. Let's move ahead. Thank you to the Army. Thank you to the President. Thank you to the United States. Thank you to the media. It was very, very moving, and I think there's a lesson there. And one of the soldiers said, let's get out on the 20th of July, which is Independence Day, and let's send a strong message. And that's what you saw on Sunday. I hope you saw the Washington Post yesterday. Those kind of manifestations of marches took place all over the country and in all the major cities in the world where there were Colombians. The message was one of free them now, immediately. And it was very, very moving. We had a meeting here at Lafayette Square. It was done also with songs. Our artists all gave their free time, and Jorge Celedon was here to celebrate with us. He plays vallenatos. He's very popular among the Colombians, so we were very grateful that he took the time. So what's been happening right now shows what wonderful cooperation between two countries that are working towards similar values have been able to achieve. So with that introduction, I'd like to move ahead, and I thought today then I would just show you what's happened in these last 6 years. Why are we feeling that this is a new Colombia and that we've gone into a virtuous circle after having been in a vicious circle? The vicious circle before was drugs, fueled illegal groups, fueled violence, led to a decrease in our economy and led to an increase in our poverty. This is a vicious circle. We've now been able to turn it around to greater security is giving us new investment security, new confidence. The Colombians and foreigners are investing, and we have a program in place that is giving us the social programs we need. So you'll see that poverty is decreasing, and so we're now into a virtuous circle after having been in a vicious circle. Let's look at the security issues, and there we see how we have been able with Plan Colombia, and the issue there, which sometimes is difficult to understand, when people talk about Plan Colombia, they talk hard side, soft side. Hard side being helicopters, winged, what they're called, helicopters, the wings that are fixed and wings that are rotaries, and it has to do with the gasoline, it has to do with maintenance, it has to do with the pilots, all this. This costs a lot of money, and that's been called the hard. And the soft, which is very necessary, has been increasing our justice, putting in programs of alternative development so that people who are involved in drugs will have other alternatives. But in fact, it's one and the same, because only with these airplanes have we been able to reach out in a country that's very rugged. Because when the Andes come into Colombia, it divides up in three. So we have mountains that go up and down in 1/3 of our country, which we say sort of like the equivalent of California. And the other part of Colombia, which would be the equivalent of Texas, half of it is jungle and half of it are savannas where there are very few people, and that's why the guerrillas have been there. So this is a country that has always favored planes because we don't have the adequate roads, where it's not a good country for trains, and in fact that's why Colombia had the first commercial airline after the United States in Latin America. It was called SCACTA, because planes are a good way to move in Colombia. So I would invite everybody to see the hard and the soft as being absolutely complementary, and we need both to be able to take the services and to make sure that we get the kind of services we need. What are we finding now? That we have the lowest homicide rate in 20 years, lowest kidnapping rates in 20 years. We're talking about 20 years. The lowest number of terrorist attacks in 18 years, and the lowest carjacking rates. Here, these graphs show us the numbers. You will see in the shaded part is what was happening before President Uribe, and then what has happened since 2002 when he came in. So there we see how homicides have gone down from 28,000 to 17,000. 17,000 still is a considerable number, but it is an incredible 40% decrease. Kidnappings have went down from 2,400 to 226. So there we have a 90% decrease. We need to get to zero, and this is a message we were sending on Sunday and we need to send. Homicide rates by cities have decreased, because what you find is that when you look at the general homicide, it's concentrated much more on the outskirts where there are the problems, not in the major cities. So you find that cities such as Medellin, Cartagena, Bogota are safer than many Latin American cities and even some American cities, so that we've definitely made progress. We've made progress in fighting drugs. We have to remember that fighting drugs has to do with the financing that our illegal groups were going. So violence and drugs and corruption go all together. So in fighting drugs, one, we're addressing issues of health, of consumption, which are fundamental, but we're also addressing issues of democracy, of maintaining institutions, of strengthening institutions. So it's important to see the fight against drugs in an integrated way and to see the effects in an integrated way. In an integrated way, we see, yes, that hectares of coca crops have decreased, probably not as much as we would have liked, but what the data will be showing, I would imagine, and here I'm speculating, but I understand that it'll be similar to the United Nations data. The hectares per se have not gone down so much. What's gone down is the productivity, because we have plants that have been pulled out. We've increased the number of plants that we are manually eradicating. So we're talking about small plants that don't have the same kind of production, or we're talking about plants that were sprayed that don't have the same kind of production. So we're finding less production, and this will be, in my next graph, I'll show you how that's reflected in the price here. The number of laboratories we've destroyed, but what's important is the number of traffickers and the mafias that we've destroyed. That's what we need to do, because by destroying them that you destroy the whole structure. And there's where these interdictions and the extraditions, we have extradited more than 700 people to the United States, and the 17 most important leaders were extradited just recently. And so, something happened here. No, this graph didn't, okay, this graph didn't work very well. Oh, it just takes time? I'm sorry. Do I have to give it time? No. Okay, this shows how the price, this is very sophisticated. This was too sophisticated for me. Okay, and so here what you see is how US cocaine purchase prices have gone up. And the next one will show how, I guess it works, no, it works the same way. This shows how the purity has gone down. So this way, in the end result of what's happening in the drugs, you can now see in the US marketplace. What we're finding is then, as a result, by taking away the financing of these groups, we're starting to win our battle against the FARC, against the ELN. You can see that we've been able, in the last year, the head, Marulanda, died, but 4 of the main first-tier leaders one was killed by his people, another one gave herself up, and another one was killed in the fights. So we're finding that the FARC are being fractured. We're hearing from them that they don't have good communications. We're hearing from those who've been rescued that the kinds of living conditions, food, etc., have deteriorated, that they don't have the same amount of ammunition. So we're definitely making very important inroads. And I think in Colombia at one point we really wondered, when will we ever be able to beat them? Because this was a group that was oblivious to everything because it was financed. So it didn't have to hear from any other country. It didn't depend on anybody for financing. It was absolutely self-contained. And so that's why we had to fight in Colombia, but at the same time offer the possibility of peace. And now it has been on the table from the very beginning. President Uribe has said from the very beginning, I will fight you, I will regain the territory, I will take the services, but you can also make peace. And that's the process that we started by defining a new law, which is very important because we had peace process before, as have other places in the world, but they're all based on amnesty and pardon. A leader who hands himself in a peace process was always pardoned and received amnesty. In Colombia, because of the kind of violence we had, the kind of massacres that had occurred, because we needed to provide support to the victims, we needed to address this issue much more responsibly, the leaders accepted that even if they gave themselves in, which is what they all did, they would have to be tried. They're being tried. They will receive lower sentences if they comply with 4 different conditions. 1, hand over all their structure, all their men, come in with all their men, and that's why we find that among the paramilitaries they came in with 40,000 men. If they stop the drug trafficking, if we find that they're drug trafficking again, they lose any of the advantages of the peace and law. They need to hand over those lands and those things, whatever they got through force. And they also have to, the kidnappees, the drugs, their people, and the illegally begotten goods that they have. If any of these we find that they're not fulfilling, they lose all of their of the possibilities of acceding to the peace and justice law. But we've also sent out this message for individual cases. And the demobilized individuals here, you see, these are guerrillas who have demobilized individually. One could also call it they've deserted the FARC, but they've deserted to a legal structure, to a country which is saying, if you desert, we will receive you. We will give you, as we are giving all the other 30,000, a subsidy so that you can go back to school, be it to get your high school or to get technical training, to get an education, and you will have psychological support. The problem with any peace process where you've had people out in arms is the recidivism. People know how to earn their life and how to make their statement with their arms. We need them to learn how to come back to the democracy and how to earn an honest living. And this is a big challenge. We're working on it. We still have problems. There is recidivism. We hope that it's half of what it's been in other places. We're told that in El Salvador and some of the Central American countries, 20% was the recidivism there was. We're finding about an 8 to 10%, but over 40,000 people, well, 8 to 10% is 4,000 people, and that's what you hear about these Águilas Negras, which are groups that are going back to drug trafficking. Because you have to remember that even as we are moving ahead, we still have that incredible challenge, which is to continue to fight the drugs. So we're making peace in an environment which can be tempting for somebody to go back to the drug trafficking. So that makes it challenging, but we're aware of it and we're trying to work very strong on that. As a result of having greater security, we're finding in an economics that we have the highest flows of foreign direct investment to date. Exports have increased by 2.5 times. Inflation rate is one of the lowest in 42 years. Interest rates have remained low and stable. And we have massive entrance. We would like to have a massive entrance. We now have more than 1 million people coming into Colombia. And we were told that Disney World is going to have their cruise go. So Mickey Mouse is going to go to Colombia this year with Donald Duck and Goofy. So we invite you to come and see us in Colombia with them. These are the specific data, and here you can see if you look at the GDP or you look at the exports or you look at the imports, between 1999 and 2007, there's an increase, or either it's been doubled or tripled. And these are the specific data that this presentation will be on our webpage, and it's available to any of you if you want to see it. Here, I think this is a very interesting graph which shows that as violence decreases, the economy increases. So you have a totally inverse relationship. As we had very high violence, our economy went into that recession. Once we've addressed the issue of violence, our economy is taking off. And that leads also to investor confidence. The growing economy is confidence of Colombians, but it's also a confidence of foreign direct investment. And in the last 3 years, you will see we've had more than $6 billion in 2005. A Saab Miller investment of 4.7 made it very, very high. But last year, we almost reached the same level with more diverse investments. Exports have been increasing, and you can see that both traditional and non-traditional has been increasing. The inflation rate has gone down from 17 to 5.6. We hope to stay there. And interest rates have also remained low and stable. And here is where you see that we've now reached the 1 million level of visitors. We hope it'll be more. Colombia lost 20 years. This was the level we had in the 80s, before the drugs and before that violence. Drugs have hurt Colombia very, very much. It's pushed us back in many ways. And this is one, as there's greater stability and we have this now peaceful areas, you now see that Colombia becomes very attractive for ecotourism. It's a country that has the greatest biodiversity, and I think it becomes very, very interesting and attractive. It's also a country that's making efforts to improve the business environment. Last year we received this year we received a prize for being one of the 7 countries in the world, according to the World Bank doing business study, that has made the most changes to make the business environment the best. And what does this mean? This means that our social indicators have also improved. If you look at Latin America, the 80s were considered the lost decade in Latin America, but for Colombia they were not. In the 90s, Colombia, because of the violence, lost everything it had gained in the 80s. So we were at the beginning, when we started in the year 2000, we're back at the 80s levels. And so our poverty had increased, and we find now that between 2002 and 2007, poverty has fallen by 13 percentage points. Unemployment is finally reaching a 1-digit level after 12 years. And we have more investment on corporate social responsibility and greater investment of the greater resources and investment in different social programs. So here we see another example of sort of increase of inverse relationships. As the economy grows, the poverty rate decreases. And here you find that when we had an economy that wasn't growing, our poverty rate increased. So here we see how our national poverty rate has decreased from 57.5 to 44. We still have an important way to go, but we're going in the right direction, as is our Gini coefficient, which is still way too high. Latin America has that problem. Our countries have very unequal distribution of wealth, and this has to be part of the policies that we have. Here we see how our unemployment rate has gone down, and here are some of the indicators of the efforts that President Uribe has made to increase coverage in Social Security, in social programs, and in education. We consider both of them, health, Social Security, and education, as fundamental. We're working very much on microfinance banking with the Banco de Oportunidades, reaching out to most of the country. What you see that is out in the shade here, this is where, here you can see very clearly how Colombia's population is distributed. Here's where the Andes goes, and so this is the more healthier sort of land, and that's why all the population is sort of concentrated there. All this is Amazon, and all these are savannas. And this part which we call, which would be sort of the equivalent in size of Texas, is what is very, very uninhabited. It's very, very low density. And so this shows how we're reaching out to those places where we have population with microfinance programs. Here's some more data on corporate social responsibility. But I just wanted to share, we're now reaching a 98% education coverage. We adopted a program, and I think there's where Latin Americans have a lot to learn from one another. Brazil had a program called Bolsa Escola, where they gave subsidies to the families to send the children to school. We picked up on that experience since 2002, and we have been increasing it, and we hope to have 5 million children in that program. But what we have been doing then is adding a little bit more to it. So not only must they keep the children in school, they must make sure that they get the vaccinations that they should. And we are also going into the schools with nutrition programs to make sure that the children are receiving breakfast and lunch, so that these are children that can grow to their full potential, and these are children that are awake and able to learn. If you're hungry, if you're with malnutrition, you can't. Medellin is doing something fantastic. They're not only giving them food the 5 days a week, they're giving them food Saturday and Sunday. The children go into school and they can get food, because they're finding that on Monday morning the children were tired, they weren't paying attention because they hadn't gotten the adequate food that they needed over the weekends. So what do we find that we have also been doing in the area of labor? There is concern about what has been happening with our labor, and I wanted to share with you some of the major changes that we have made to address the issue of labor. We have increased our resources of government to provide protection for union members, whose situation has improved, fortunately, as the situation for all of the calamities have improved, but we'll see the data later on. And so we will find that the homicide rates of union members has gone down by 87% as compared to the 40% for the population in general. In all these cases, we need to improve. This is not a justification at all, and please never understand it as that. What we're trying, though, to see are the trends, and I think that's what is important at this moment. The average time we've worked on making structural changes, and I think what's important when we look at labor and when we look at what's happening in Colombia, these aren't just momentary decisions. They have to do with basic structural changes. And in response, for example, because fighting the violence, decreasing the violence for the general population and specific populations such as labor is part of what Colombia needs and is doing. It was a campaign program the president defined, and we've been working in different ways. Every one of our governments have been trying to work in that way, so we have to understand it as a commitment the country has with itself. The same with justice. Our justice system had overflowed. With 33,000 homicides a year, our justice system, which on top of that was a written system that came from the Napoleonic laws, the Napoleonic Code, was a very slow system. We were absolutely overwhelmed. So President Uribe also, since 2002, wanted a structural change. We made a constitutional change. And we've now gone to the accusatory system, which is the one you have in your country here. So you have two people doing, you have the attorneys doing the investigation, and then you have the judges making the decision. In Colombia, it was the same judge who did the whole process, and it was all written. Here, it's oral. You have people coming in, it's open. Our other system was closed. So you will see, and I will share with you, that this structural change, which has taken 4 years to put in place, it took 2 years to pass, because if it's a constitutional change, it has to go through 2 different years of Congress, and has to go through the 2 houses, committee plenary of House and Senate, committee plenary in the following year. And then for 3 years, we've been training attorney generals and we've been training judges, because it's a completely different system. So the conviction rate has increased, and we have also increased the number of inspectors. Here is where you can see how the homicide rate of union members has gone down. What is very sad in both of these cases is that we still have these numbers, and as you will see, half of them are teachers, because the teachers are an important part of our union membership. And teachers aren't are not being killed because they're teachers. It's because they're out in these areas where there's still violence. They are out there providing services. So we have put into place a program with our Ministry of Education. Any teacher who feels threatened is immediately transferred before doing any kind of study. And so this year we've transferred, I don't remember the data, but it's more than 1,000 teachers from one place to the other addressing this issue, just as we have created a program for labor union members, but also for mayors and councilmen who are threatened. They can come and get protection. This is a program that went from $2 million to $42 million a year. Half of that money is going to labor union members. There are more than 1,959 union members who are receiving protection. And what's interesting is that the labor unions are part of this program. They are the ones who help to analyze what kind of protection program is required. And so we hope to receive, in that way, to achieve 2 effects. One, that the labor unions will let their members know that this is an option that's out there. And secondly, that they will be there to allow us to make the best decision as to the kind of protection that the labor union members require. Here we start seeing what we made as a constitutional reform, working on the judicial. And so between 202 and 204, constitutional reform. 205, then what we started doing was preparing our judges and our attorney generals by different parts of the country. So we started first Bogotá, Manizales, Pereira, Armenia, that's our coffee region. Then we went to Medellín, Bucaramanga, San Gil. These were sort of the second layer of big cities and their surrounding areas. The third, then we went out to smaller cities, which were further out. And since this year, we've had nationwide coverage. We are finding, with data of this year and a bit of last year, as this has gone to place, that the number of average days to indictment have gone down significantly. And we hope that this just shows the kind of trend that we're going to be seeing as this system moves along much better. But this is not a system that was changed. This is a system that we felt was absolutely necessary to make our justice work better. And this is an area where we have received very important support from the US. Your Department of Justice has helped us, has trained our attorney generals, and that is very important in that vision that you and we have been sharing as to how Colombia has to improve. So here we also see that not only are we improving the convictions in general, but we are addressing the issue of human rights in particular. And the Attorney General's office, which is totally independent, it's not like here in the States, it's part of the executive. Our Attorney General's office is part of the judicial system. And so what the government has done is doubled the amount of money that we've given the Attorney General's office from the general budget. But for the Human Rights Office, they've gotten an increase of 70%. So there's a subunit that has to do with a unit that has to do with human rights, and in there are subunits, one that has to do with peace and justice, one that has to do with extrajudicial killings, one that has to do with labor union members, and each one has attorneys that have been defined to work on these cases to make sure that we move them ahead. And in the case of the labor cases, there are 187 that have been prioritized. These were defined, the priority were defined with the labor unions. They had put complaints at the ILO for 1,000 cases, some of which were thefts, some were threats, some were homicides, and they said these were the 187 they wanted to see move through faster. They've been moving along. As of this year, there have been 177 convictions, and this is moving along. Some of these cases are what are called cold cases, so it takes a while to get going, but we're moving. And we have been working very strongly with the ILO and the other thing that we've done is this year we're worried because the number of homicides has gone up in percentage-wise compared to last year. Last year there were 27 homicides of labor union members. In the whole year there was 27. This year it's 27 as we speak today. Once again with that same number, half being teachers, half being others. And we don't quite understand what's happening here. The initial investigations show that there are different kinds of reasons. Some have to do with delinquency, some have to do with violence in different regions. Others may have to do with issues related to their labor union activity, but it's not one pattern. We're still finding that this has a manifestation of that violence that is taking place in the country. So the President has passed a new bill to increase prison penalties for homicide of trade union members. We're sending a very strong message. And there are also rewards paid for information which will allow us to move forward. And we've been working also on our labor rights. Colombia has implemented, ratified the 60 ILO conventions. As we worked with the labor issues, we have started a cooperation program. And in that manner, we have decided we are working to address these issues with labor, with the employees, and with the government. So we are feeling very, very optimistic, but we're starting to find, and you know that procession always takes longer than the reality to catch up. And so I invite you to go to Colombia because that's the best way to catch up what's happened in these 6 years. But you are finding that The Economist, The Guardian, Business Week have already started to register this change and this improvement. Inside Colombia, a changing landscape, we find articles also in the New York Times suggesting that it's very interesting to see what is happening in Medellin. So visit Cartagena, which is beautiful, but also visit Medellin, visit the coffee region, visit Bogota. This was a study done by the CSIS where it said, back from the brink, and it shows the progress in Colombia. Business Week has identified us as one of the emerging markets. And I think what's also interesting is that we find that other leaders are also seeing Colombia's improvement, and they feel that it's important that we continue to work together as a region. And so the leaders of the region, starting with President Bachelet and President Alan Garcia of Peru, and President Torrijos, most of the Central Americans, President Calderon, Prime Minister Harper, have all come out and written to Speaker Pelosi saying, let's complete this vision we have of the region. These are all countries that have trade agreements with the U.S., and they see the trade agreements as a way of creating a greater integration in the region and making sure that we are working in a more solid way towards the same kind of values. There had been more than 100 supportive editorials for the trade agreement before the rescue. After the rescue, we've gotten 40 more, which just show that there's a feeling that this is a way to continue to help a country that is moving forward. The Democrats who live in Colombia have written to their members asking them to consider the free trade agreement with Colombia. They see it as something that is important in their view as they live in Colombia, and they have asked that it be included, and I think was included in the 2008 platform of Democrats abroad. Here we have Colombia because, like the U.S., we believe that open economy and trade is a good way to move forward. At this moment, we either have agreements with these countries or we are in the process. Just last week, we finished our negotiation with EFTA. We had finished the week before our negotiation with Canada. We have strengthened our negotiation with Chile, with Mexico. And so Colombia is moving ahead in this way. And we think that there's a very important piece there that needs to be addressed, which is the U.S. Because why? The U.S. has been our most important trade partner. And although somebody was saying, but you're not a very important country for our economy. We're not the largest economy, but we have 40 million people. We're seeing how our GDP has doubled. We're seeing how you'll see the agriculture is very complementary. So what we want to start is by leveling the playing field. You have given us preferences for 15 years. So if we're worried about the economy, whatever disruption there might have been, and I think it was minimum, that has been worked out through the system. And what we've done now is create jobs in Colombia and in the U.S. We've created more than 600,000 jobs in Colombia. We have probably created a similar number here because, for example, with flowers, for every flower grower that we have there, of the person who's cutting flowers, you create 1.5 jobs here because it has to be sold and distributed. And we find with the mills in North Carolina, you're selling us the cotton we need for the apparel. So we've gotten this going. Let's allow your products to come in, and let's have these preferences, which are always temporary. And that part that it's temporary means we don't have the level of investment we want to have. We need to move. Make it cheaper and more competitive. Ours is a tropical economy. Yours is temperate. We buy wheat, we buy soy, we buy corn from the U.S. We are the largest buyer of agricultural goods because our economies are complementary. The largest buyer in Latin America. U.S. exporters have an edge over competition because we have had this alliance. We have worked together. We know each other, and we all know that trust is good for building. And we want to keep a beneficial relationship growing. Trade has to do about trade, but it also has to do about other kinds of ties, other kinds of relationships. It has to do with trust. It has to do with stability. It has to do with making our countries and our relationships stronger. And so this is why I would invite you to continue to, that we continue working together. We're finding that the free trade agreement, these are studies that we're doing, show that it would mean growth in Colombia. The IIE did studies here that shows it would mean growth for the U.S., but above all, we have been friends, and friends are here to help friends, and I think it's good for the U.S., it's good for Colombia, and I appreciate the time that you've given me this morning to listen to the Colombian story, which I hope you will have a chance to go down with Mickey Mouse and see for yourself that it's not a Mickey Mouse story. It's a real good story that has a lot of substance to it, and thank you very, very much.
And I know we have some time left, so I did want to open it up as an opportunity for questions about the ambassador's presentation or to Nelson as well. On any issues you guys may have regarding U.S.-Colombian relations. But before I do get to that, I did want to say that in honor of Colombian Independence Day, I needed to buy a new suit. And so my suit here that I bought yesterday was made in Colombia 100%. So I'm doing my part here. But anyways, is there anyone in the audience who would have a question? Yes, gentleman in the back. Can you please stand up? Yeah.
Colombian agriculture industry and farmers to export or to produce their products in a less competitive environment according to them. What is your perspective on that?
No, this is a problem that maybe other countries have been faced, but we don't because our agriculture is so totally different. So basically what we produce, which are bananas or coffee or cocoa or rubber, there was a group of congressmen who went down this weekend, and we went to see a palm oil plantation. These are things that grow in Colombia, which don't grow in the States, and we don't grow wheat and corn and soy in the way that we need it. Of course, we do grow a little bit, but we know we're not competitive, and we know that, and we have been buying. We're big buyers of these products already in the U.S. So what this would do is lower the tariff for these products, because since they're based on a price band that is related to the WTO, sometimes on these agricultural products, you're paying between 35 and 110% tariff, depending on the price because of the band. What this would do is allow you to sell more, and for our consumers, it would mean we have better prices. So this is why I don't think that agriculture is going to be a real issue. There's some, as in all trade agreements, there were some areas in Colombia that were worried. Rice, for example. But now with the rice prices, the rice people are worried right now. It's changed a bit. But in rice, for example, we don't think we are really very competitive. So what we have started doing is working with these areas to see if they want to either improve their productivity, because of the level that they're producing right now. Right now they're competitive because the price is so high. But when things settle down, maybe they need to improve the productivity, or they want to change to another product. We already have programs in place to work with them. And there was concern about chicken, because you don't eat in the States, you don't like the legs, and you don't like it, you just like apparently you just like the breast of the chicken.
I like dark meat.
So I don't understand that, but anyway, no. So this meant that you have to like a double price for chicken, and so what did we do? That is going to be taking, I think it's 15 years to taper out completely that tariff. And in the meantime, either we produce good chicken or we get out of the chicken business. But otherwise, it's very, very helpful. And as I said, since we're complementary, we think that this will work out very, very well. And we don't foresee the kind of disruption that you might have in other places. But let it be said, I think the problem with trade is we also have to realize trade just doesn't happen. You have to also help it so that it works out and you don't run into these kind of sectors that are left out or very hurt. And in Colombia, for example, we know we have to invest in roads, we have to invest in our ports, we have to invest in technology to make sure that when the trade does start, when we get this trade agreement going, it will be able to flow, we'll be able to take advantage of it. And so we have started now with some programs that are clearly directed at making sure that the roads will reach out to the different places so that different regions will have access to the market. And then we want to make sure that we're getting it out in the right hands with good investment in ports. So I think trade agreements have to have in the different countries the possibility of having other policies that make sure that they work in the best way.
Question right there.
Hi.
Can you please stand and identify yourself,
Sure.
please? Thank you.
My name is Jay Heffer. I'm with Congress now. The way the FTA was presented to Congress, the way President Bush presented it to Congress, even though it was a slim chance of passing before with all the resistance to it, the way it was presented, did that hurt its chances in Congress?
I hope it still has chances in Congress. I think that we're still hopeful that in this year we will be able to see the free trade pass. What we have been trying to do as a Colombian embassy is to make sure that congressmen and their staff, we're helping them evaluate the situation, have the best information on Colombia, on what this free trade agreement means for both of our countries, and I hope that this will allow them to make an informed decision. And we're still hopeful. We'll be working until the last day to see if it's possible that this trade agreement can pass.
So it wasn't hurt the way it was brought up to Congress? It didn't hurt its chances at all, do you think?
I think it's been delayed, and I think we have to see that the decision is made to move it ahead. But we will continue to work in trying to convince Congressmen that this is something that is important and that it makes a difference if it's now or in a couple of years. Colombia is moving and improving tremendously right now. And because we're moving, to have a free trade agreement would really give us a boost. And it would be a boost for you also because there's a lot of opportunity. You've seen how our economy has taken off. You've seen how direct investment is improving, and this would just make it easier for American investment also. So to do it right now is a boost to a country that is moving in a very positive direction, and I think has a very stabilizing effect on a region where there are different models that are being looked at in ways of handling government, of looking at one's economy. And I just think that if we look at the implications, we see the results, they're beneficial, and they should be able to help Congress decide to move this ahead.
Mr. Cunningham, would you like to respond? Was the FTA hurt by the way it was presented to Congress?
I think that I think it's plain that politics of trade have become very difficult in this country over the years. And Colombia finds itself in the position of being an innocent bystander in a deep domestic debate about trade. I think that the administration made an important step last year in May when it reached out to the Democrats and agreed to include labor and the environment in agreements. I think that the Democrats on the Hill also reached out to the administration. I credit both sides for doing that. I'm just sad that reaching out didn't happen in May of 2001 instead of May of 2007. I think it would have been a lot more progress. I think today the politics are such that it's difficult for trade agreements to move forward. There are many of us who are hopeful that Colombia will have a chance to get through this year, but it may well fall to the next president. It certainly will fall to the next president to do the remedial work on our politics and trade that needs to be done. I think whether it's President Obama or President McCain, if we're going to get back to a place where we can move forward with trade liberalization in a responsible and fair way, there's going to be a lot of spade work that will have to be done with Congress.
Yeah, Maria Canella from News Services. I have a follow-up to the trade question. Congressman McCreary circulated...
Again, I'm going to ask if you can just please stand.
I'm sorry?
If you can please stand.
Oh.
Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Just a follow-up on the trade question. Congressman McCreary circulated a dear colleague letter basically saying that if the FTA doesn't happen before the 110th session is done, it's going to be dead. And so my question is, do you have a plan B if it does not get approved in this session? And also, I did have a chance to go to Colombia, and I interviewed people who normally do not get that kind of coverage. Small-scale farmers are really concerned about the impact the FDA will have on them. You know, they're concerned about not being able to compete with large corporations in the export section or sector. And also, a lot of them are giving up illicit crops, but they feel they're not getting enough help from the government to move away from those crops and market legal crops. So I was wondering if you could follow up on that as well.
Well, let's start with the second one, which has to do with crop substitution. We are finding that it is much, as we're addressing the issue of drugs, we are finding that it is important to have a policy which has two parts. One, the spraying has been important because there are certain areas in the country where either we can't get there or it's still too violent, and if we put people on the ground, they're going to be killed. And we need to continue sending a message that drug production in Colombia is not acceptable. So what it has to do there is it's a deterrent, and it's saying this is not acceptable. But we are finding that where we can, because we have greater security now, if we can put people on the ground to do manual eradication, this is very effective because it allows us to be there and immediately start with drug substitution programs. And this is the new emphasis that we have. We have been doing these kind of programs with the US and with Colombia, but they have been more isolated, and we think that it needs to be seen as an integral part and immediate. So, for example, what we went to see of the palm oil, what's interesting there, this is a plantation which is about an hour away from Cartagena, very close to an area that still has guerrilla, where our previous foreign minister had been kidnapped, which is Los Montes de Maria, and we went to Maria la Baja. These are 500 families that have brought in their land, and they're part of a bigger of this cooperative, and this cooperative now has a plant that can get the oil out, etc. We need to work, and these are the kind of projects we're trying to see how we can work much more with cooperatives and helping smaller farmers come together. For example, for the ethanol, we're working on ethanol plants also with small producers of cane. It doesn't have to be the huge mills. This is also working. So clearly, we need to focus very much on making sure that those who give up the drugs do have an alternative, and that has to continue being a priority, and I think we have to be better at it than we have been. The other question was about whether it's dead. My understanding, but I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert, is that the parliamentarians are saying that if the FTA is not passed this year, we would lose the fast track protections. So that's what would be dead. But it doesn't mean that the trade agreement is dead. We would have to see then how, under what conditions it would be able to move forward. So our plan B is a free trade agreement, and we just have to see how it moves. So it's a free trade agreement and a free trade agreement.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, Leslie Rodriguez from the Hispanic Institute. You touched upon the drug production in Colombia not being acceptable. However, the consumption is done largely here in the United States and in Europe. So I was wondering, does the Colombian government have any social policies or laws it would like to see the United States government pass in order to combat that demand here?
You've been working on consumption, and I totally agree. I mean, we have this message of shared responsibility, I think, needs to go in deeper. It is a problem between countries that are consuming and countries that are producing. Colombia, for example, didn't produce coca. It was not part of a culture. In other countries, it was part of their culture. Colombia did not have a culture of coca. And this is something that came new and totally related to cocaine. So I think it's very important that we continue to maintain this in the front burner and not put it back. And sometimes I feel we've decided that that problem is over. That problem is not over. Here, fortunately, it seems that your data shows that you've been decreasing consumption, especially among the young consumers, so that you're reaching out to the schools and trying to avoid getting people going into drugs. That's really great. I understand that there's more difficulty with the hardened consumer, and so the big effort that you're making is really trying to reach out to youth, and that makes a lot of sense. And we want to continue to see that. We need to see the same kind of commitment in Europe. Before, the problem was that the cocaine problem was seen as an American problem between Latin America and North America. But with globalization, drugs have become globalized. So we're finding heroin, which was a European-Asian problem, becoming an American-Asian-European problem, and the cocaine, once again, we're finding exactly the same thing. We're finding, for example, that we have clamped down and have become much more effective between the US, Colombia, and Mexico and other countries in the Caribbean. The drugs are going out through the Pacific, and the drugs are going out through Venezuela, Guyana. They're going to Africa. It worries me very much what can happen in Africa, because drugs, Eve one says, they're in transit. There's no such thing as transit, because drugs always leave a terrible legacy of corruption and of violence. Drugs know no limit. Those drug traffickers know no limit, and they have such incredible amounts of money that they will not stop anywhere. And drugs are going in then to Spain and Portugal and Great Britain, etc. So we need to keep this on the front burner. We need to keep on working together. And so right now we have a program which is trying to raise awareness of this shared responsibility in Europe, and we're hoping to bring that information and work on it here. Although we have felt that in the States, that Colombia was that product of the shared responsibility. We feel that here, this is much more, we've been working on it more, but in other parts we need to keep on working, and we need to continue to be aware that we both have a responsibility and we each need to do our part.
Any other questions? Yes, we have one.
Hi, I'm in the chair of the International Trade Reporter. You're running straight into the U.S. political year dealing with it. I wondered if you'd be able to tell me if you reached out to the campaigns, what kinds of responses you've had with them, and how how do you perceive that as affecting the channels of passage of the FTA?
We reach out to everybody. We reach out to Congress. We've been working in a bipartisan way. We've been trying to reach out to the campaigns. We think it's important, not only for trade, but that there be a better understanding of Colombia, of the US-Colombian relationship, a bit of what we talked about today. And so, yes, we have been trying to reach out, but this has been part of our policy all year long. What we have been doing at the embassy is trying to get congressmen, but businessmen, foundations to go to Colombia and see what's happening. This has to be about different voices. This has to be about understanding the relationship Colombia and the U.S. have. And our high officials have been coming up here, and every time they come, we have think tanks over for lunch. We have presentations in different places. So I think this is part of sort of an ongoing exchange of information and ongoing understanding of our relationship, and that's what we'll continue to do. And part of it, of course, has to do with reaching out to the two campaigns and trying to share information with them so that as they work out their policies, they'll have as best information they can about Colombia, but also Latin America. The GRULA, which is a group of Latin American ambassadors, has also been reaching out as a group. We're interested in talking about policy with Latin America with both campaigns. And so we've been doing that as a group. When we go to the convention now, and we'll be going to both conventions as a group. We hope to hold conversations as a group with the different campaigns. So this is part of what I do every day, and I think it's part of getting to know each other and understanding each other.
All right, well, thank you guys very much for coming. As the ambassador just mentioned, in August there will be the Democratic National Convention going on in Denver, and the Congress is also in recess, so we will not be hosting a panel in DC during the month of August, but we will resume the initiative beginning in September. So we hope that you guys continue to join us and participate in the events. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at NDN. The main office number is 202-544-9200. Our information is in the packet, and I also have business cards if any of you guys need some. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.